Hello everybody, welcome to a Friday Live. Now this is the first one for quite a few weeks, and I think this is the first time I've done like a colour study like this, like a kind of a master. It's not really a master copy, it's just a colour study, so not sure how long we'll be going for today, maybe an hour or so, something like that. But this is one of the things that ChromaMagic, the ChromaMagic app, is incredibly useful for. And if you're wondering about that app, have a look in the description below. If you're watching this after the fact, after the stream, you can find out more about it in the description. And it's really, really good for these kinds of copies, like color copies. So if you've been following me for any length of time, you will know that I've recently started doing quite a lot of plein air painting, which I absolutely love. I was out today, actually. What you find very quickly when you start doing plein air is that it's different from working in the studio, because the main problem is reducing that huge range of values that you've got in nature down to the very small range of values, like about this big in comparison. Like here's nature, here's what we can do in paint. Oh, still got my whiskey. You caught me out. So that's the biggest problem that we've got, really. And also it's complicated by the fact that there is no one right way to do it. So, you know, we have the full range of paint, but all of the values between the highest value and the lowest value are movable. So you can paint like the Impressionists, who moved all of their values up. So all of their shadow values are lighter than they appear, and it gives you an image which is kind of suffused with light. Or you can paint it more like a kind of a classical look, like Rembrandt or something like that, or Dutch Golden Age still life paintings, where they bring the middle values down. So you end up with an overall dark painting with the light parts really shining out, right? It's more of a studio look, but you can do that outside too, if you know how to manipulate values. Or you can use a value balance which is more like the naturalist painters, who tended to have a fairly even balance of values across the painting, you know, which gives a really beautiful result, I think. So Levitan here, I would say Levitan's value balance, this is a painting by Issak Levitan, incredibly wonderful Russian landscape painter. Now, he was mostly a plein air painter, so, you know, kind of comes from the lineage of Corot and Constable. Very naturalistic painter. I think probably he's gone for a fairly even compression of the value range here. That's what we're going to find out. So it's one of the interesting things about doing this, is finding out what values he chose for which area of the painting. But I'm going to simplify this down just to a few main colors. Okay, so it's going to look kind of cartoony and blocky. I'm not going to try and bring this to a finish. The point of doing this is to learn something about what colors he mixed. And then once you've learned that, when you go out yourself and you're out painting from nature, can kind of give you a way in. So I've done a lot of these over the past few months, little color studies like this. I thought I'd share the making of this one with you. I've chosen this image because it's out of copyright, so it's all right for me to do it. Now, I will copy anybody's painting that I find on Pinterest. So I'll copy living artists, you know. Obviously, I won't do that on a live stream, because they would rightly get quite upset about it, and we can't have that. Let's see, try and catch up with the comments a little bit. Oh, lots of people here, considering I haven't been doing Friday Lives much. Thomas is here. So Ontario is represented, The Hague and Arizona, West Sussex, yay, and Paris. Oh, very nice. I imagine it's dark over there like it is here as well. So North Carolina, wow. It's lovely to see you all again. Thanks for being back. I've got to be honest, I've missed these Friday Lives. They are tiring sometimes. You know, I got into a position where I was getting a bit tired out by them, but I really have missed them, and it's nice to see you all. And London too, cool. Thomas, you got snow. Yeah, we haven't actually got snow, but I had to pack up a little bit early today because it rained. Listen, let's stop yakking, and I'm going to bring up this I'm going to bring up this painting in ChromaMagic, and I'll show you how we're going to do this today. So if you have ChromaMagic, you can download this image from WikiMedia Commons, and it's free to download. You know, so the link is in the description. So anytime you want to have a go at doing this, if you're watching this on YouTube after it's live, then you can grab this image and you can have a go at this. So like looking around at this, the first thing I'm going to do is exactly the same thing that I would do if I was painting this from life. I'm going to squint. And I want to know, get a good idea of what the dark values are, okay? So what you can do, there's a couple of things you can do in ChromaMagic, like I could make it value only, and then I can drastically reduce the number of values. And that can work really well, but it kind of does it on a threshold. So is it darker than this? Is it lighter than this? So you end up with lots of little bits, which is not necessarily how I would approach it. Oh, hello. Teddy bear. Big dog just came in. It's not necessarily how I would approach it. Like you still need to squint at this and simplify it further, to make it work. So there's that. There's also this, which is a very beguiling little function that it has. Now this is nice because it will actually show you, the color palette for the majority of the painting. And you can click on these things and it will show you where it is, highlight where it is. And I believe there is a function in here where it will give you the paints that you can mix those with. I mean, as a learning tool, quite incredible. But there's still, it doesn't simplify the shapes as well as I would like, personally. So, I mean, that is a really good way to approach it. A really good way to approach it. You can just simplify it like that, and then you could paint from this image. But personally, I would do it from. Come on, turn off. No, don't do that. Seems to be a little bit behind what I'm doing. Why has it done this? Yeah, turn all that red stuff off. It's gone a little bit funny. I don't know what. I shouldn't have gone on to the palette thing, should I? And then back to the colour. It seems to. Why is it doing that? I'm not entirely sure how you turn that off, actually. Oh, it's showing me, isn't it, what I've clicked on? Okay. So now it's showing me all the greys. I want to stop it doing that. Michelle, if you're here, you can pop in the chat like how I stop it doing this, because I don't want it to do it anymore. Click away from the image, I suppose, and then it'll stop. No, it won't. All right. In any case, what I would do for this is I would be clicking around. I'd have it on color like this. So what it's obviously started to do something where it's highlighting all the similar colors. And it's my Mac is having a little bit of trouble with it because it's very old. But what I would personally do is I wouldn't have this highlighter thing on. This is so frustrating. I've never seen it do this before because I've only just started playing with this palette thing. How do I turn it off? How do we turn this thing off? I'm not sure. It looks really useful, but I want to know how to turn it off. And at the moment, I'm not sure. It might be just that my Mac is having trouble with it. Anyway, what you would do, so I'll just show you pretty quickly. Try and ignore all the red stuff. I would click on various things, like you can set the sample size here. How big do I want the sample size to be? I usually have it somewhere in the middle. And I can click on an area and it will give me an idea. Like if you see, like this area down here is a lot of different colors. But if I click around, I'll kind of get an average, of what I might decide to do that in. So my darkest dark is definitely going to be around here. And that's like a value 2, so that's really low, value 2. It's like this color. The lightest light is probably going to be this part of the tree trunk here. don't worry about these numbers. We just want to look at just the particular color swatch and see what kind of color it is. Like, that's interesting because you might not think that that's a yellow. It's actually a middle yellow. So it gives you a clue, even that, how to mix it. So I'm going to try, and we're going to bring the trunk down to 2 or 3 colors. We're going to bring all of these areas of foliage down to 2 or 3 colors as well. So we'll have a shadow area for this. We'll have a light area for this. And then, you know, we can mix a little bit between them if we want as well. Okay. So that's basically how I'd approach doing this in ChromaMagic. Let me turn and go back to the normal screen. So I'm going to switch the palette on. Here we go. And I'll switch the easel camera on. Oh, I haven't got my panel set up yet. Oh, Christine says the little wheel right under turns it off. Oh, looks like we've got a delivery. Someone's coming around. Yeah, no, I don't. Oh, no, the dog wants out. This is, obviously it's because I haven't done a live stream for so long. Everything is going to go wrong all at the same time. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Christine. Managed to figure out how to turn it off. Maybe I'll bring it up again a little bit, ChromaMagic, as we're working, and see. I wonder if I just did a bit of random clicking there. Most likely. Oh, let me get rid of this. This is actually, oh, for anyone who's on the current workshop, the Brushes with Autumn workshop, this is your next assignment. I've recorded the video, but I've got to finish editing it and get that up to you. Let's get those out of the way. Get my panel set up. So I'm going to do this on an 8x8 gesso board panel, ampersand gesso board. I like these. They're a bit expensive for a colour studies, really, but you know, I can always wipe this off afterwards and then reuse the panel, as long as the paint is white, because the point of the exercise with this is just to learn something, you know, and once the learning is done, I don't really need to keep the painting, arguably. Let's move that to the side a little bit so the palette's not in the way. And also, because I've been out painting today already, I actually haven't cleaned up my palette yet. So this is actually my plein air palette. And when I say it's a plein air palette, I mean, I don't mean the colours. I mean, this actually is my plein air palette. This attaches to a tripod and I go out and paint with this. And I haven't cleaned it since I got back. So let's get all of these mixes off here. Basically just threw it down here and took the dogs out in the orchard. Very lucky to live in an old farmhouse with an orchard out the back. Which some of these, you know, my little tree paintings, I've been doing a lot of tree paintings, little tree studies lately. Some plein air, some a couple from photos, and some from other painters' work, like little colour studies like this. So before I start this, or actually whilst I'm doing it, I'll talk a little bit about these colours that I've got on here and how I use them, because this is my plein air palette. This is also the colours that I choose mostly, sometimes with the addition of quinacridone rose if I need a red. It's not very different. If you're familiar with any of my workshops or courses, it's not very different from the the palette that I normally use. Actually, maybe we'll go over this first. Tips working using a reference that is on a screen. I think it depends. It depends. That's difficult for me to say really, because it depends what kind of screen you're using. I think a good way to do it is to use an iPad or something like that, an Android tablet, and to have it, if you can, up on your easel or whatever your work surface is, like next to the painting that you're doing. Now, the thing about screens is that they do have a slightly wider value range than paint does, but not by very much. And if you have it next to your painting, then you can do almost like a kind of a sight size approach. If you can blow it up to the same size as you're working, if you're not working all that large. But it depends. I mean, if you're using like a Windows laptop, if it's a cheap Windows laptop, frankly, forget it. Those screens are so bad and the color is so bad on them. The Apple screens are pretty good across pretty much everything. Because they're traditionally used by designers, they put a lot of the money into the design of the screen. And the colors are fairly natural. Let me tell you what I've got. I'm going to put some more white out. So this is lead white. I always put a couple of wodges of that because one of them gets dirty really quickly, so then I've got a clean one already. I've got cad yellow here. So this is Rublev lead white. Everything else is Michael Harding. So this is cad yellow. And I'm also going to put out bright yellow lake. So I usually paint like this when I paint outside, with two yellows, a green yellow and an orange, a more orange yellow, which is kind of like, parts of this are arguably like the split primary palette, although I don't believe in primary colours and don't use them at all. All of these colours are here for a particular reason, and I'll be able to show you why they're here while I'm doing this. This is yellow ochre. Now that is an addition that I've put on the palette just for painting plein air. When I'm painting still life, I don't need that. But I find so much in nature is so close to yellow ochre, it's really handy to have it on the palette, you know. This is green gold, also because an awful lot, especially in autumn, is really close to green gold. This is transparent red oxide, which means that I can go from a red orange to a green, basically in a low value by mixing between them. Really, really useful. I don't know if I would, yeah. Jay Woody says, I think your endorsement of Apple products has convinced me I need a new laptop. The thing is, like, I use a Windows machine for most of the stuff that I do, the photo processing that I do, and the video editing and all of that, but I've got a really good screen for it. I've got a color calibrated screen. It wasn't massively expensive, but it was about 300 quid or something like that, and the default kind of Windows laptop screens are, frankly, they're pretty terrible compared to Apple ones, which are better. There's lots of reasons I don't like Apple, but the screens are good. Raw umber, because raw umber is in everything, basically. Maybe we'll put a little bit more on that out. This is here to drop the chroma of anything which is towards a yellow or an orange, and ivory black, which is good for dropping the chroma of anything which is toward blue. It's also good for making greens, as we'll see in a minute. Now this is cobalt blue, which is another addition for, I'm not going to need very much of that, so I'll leave that there. Another addition for just for when I'm painting plein air, because skies. But also one more colour is I'll have two whites when I'm painting plein air. I have the lead white, which I use most of the time, and at the moment I'll also have titanium white, and I just use that with the cobalt blue for skies. I could probably drop it, but I like to have like the option of going right up to the top of the value range, you know, so this goes slightly lighter than the lead white does. Michelle, you're here. Brilliant. I can't believe it. The one time I needed support with my ChromaMagic and you weren't here. But don't worry, Christine sorted us out. So I'm just... Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't ever use a TV screen to paint from. God, no. I mean, the colours are... well, actually, I should be careful what I say because I haven't done any kind of a scientific investigation, but the colours are just awful, you know. This is what I've been painting with today, these brushes, so I probably will reuse some of those. First thing I'm going to do is what I always do. Now, I even do this when I'm painting plein air. Sometimes I forget because there's a lot to think about. Like today was really, really windy and all my stuff was blowing around. It was nice and sunny when I got out there, but it was really windy. So it was windy enough to blow the brushes off my my little setup, you know, my little plein air setup. So we'll see about all of these colours as we go through, and I'll explain a little bit about what they're there for. So I'm just I'm wiping back that oil. Let me change back to them. Back to the easel so you can see what I'm doing. Oops. Just arranging my lights a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, I always do this anyway, I'm just going to divide this. So this is, as I said, this is an 8x8 because the painting is square or almost square. Just helps to kind of, for me anyway, I find it helps to have it, to visualize it, you know, but just by having a really basic kind of a grid on it. And I'm going to start by, this is basically how I would approach it. I'm going to approach this just as if I was doing a plein air painting. This brush already has some green on it, but I'm just going to get some raw umber on there and wipe it off so there's not too much on there. And I'm going to start outlining like where are the light and the dark shapes, like especially the dark shapes I'm looking for. And I'm going to try and do this kind of independently of objects, if that makes sense. So we have a dark shape down the bottom here. So I'm going to start by just kind of drawing in where they are, rough them out. Comes up to the tree trunk, which starts about here. This is all light, so that's all the light part of the tree trunk. But to the left of it, we've got a couple of dark shapes. This I'm going to say is all dark. Just really kind of simply, you know, this is... For me, this is kind of the starting point for most paintings, but especially like for plein air, like I'm just looking for the lights and the shadows. So I start generally with the shadows. And this is kind of general plein air received wisdom, if you like, is to get your shadows in pretty quick, because what tends to happen is that the shadows are the first thing that you notice moving as the light changes. So if you're outside and you're painting for 2-3 hours, you know, the light is going to change a lot in that time. I'm just looking for the dark shape here, fairly simply. Not too bothered about getting things exact in terms of drawing. I mostly just want to get the shapes in. So you see here, like we've got the dark shape of the tree trunk here, and then there's a dark value behind it, which is actually the foliage in shadow, I'm going to join that and make a single shape out of it. Not sure that really does go down there, actually. It's more kind of across like this. So I'm going to join those two shapes together, that like the shadow shape in the foliage and the tree trunk. Actually, I did this today when I was painting, which helped me visualize it. I actually started roughing in, like filling in the dark shapes. And it's amazing, like even if you just do a real basic start like this, you can actually get pretty close to having something that looks something like what you're going for, like really early on. So the painting that I did today, I started exactly like this. Just looking for the light and the shadow shapes. Just looking for the shadow shapes, actually, the dark values. No, they don't have to be shadows. I mean, if there was a very dark object, it could have light on it. So it's mostly about the values. So I'm going to fill all that in as well. Just really thinly, just really lightly, so I can see. Where's going to be shadow and where's going to be light. So what I do a lot when I'm looking for paintings to do this with, I mean, you know, I've got to clean. I spend a lot of time on Pinterest looking at the moment, especially at landscape paintings, historical ones, contemporary ones. You know, I love Pinterest, and you know, I zoom into them and I download them, and some of them I copy. I'm not even going to show you the copies because I don't. A lot of them are from painters who are still alive, work of paint that I just really like. The you know, something about a particular painting, or it might have something in it that I found particularly difficult when I was out painting one day. You know, so I said, well, how did this person approach it? And then you can take those photos into ChromaMagic and play with them. We've got another dark shape over here. Literally, I'm very much trying to see these as shapes at the moment. And it's not just for the sake of, you know, making things look awkward or difficult or anything like that. It's because it really, really helps you map out a scene. Because outside, you know, if you're painting outside, part of the reason I chose this painting to do is because it's quite complex. So it means that there's a similar kind of a simplification job to do. But if you're painting outside, it's the same. You know, the first thing you've got to do is really simplify things down. And just look for the shapes. And I've found personally that it really helps to just get the dark shapes in. And you have to kind of, like, there's a lot of detail within this shape. There's even sky holes in it, but you know, you have to kind of try and ignore those and just put things in just as shapes. We'll eventually join this shape up with one that I'm going to start over here. So I'm squinting all the time. This is the thing that software can't do for you. I haven't seen any that can actually do this for you yet, which is join things together into shapes. You know, the threshold thing is really, really useful in showing you like where the dark and the lighter values are. But it will show you like middle and light values inside of areas that, you know, you want all to be dark. You don't want to, you know, so I don't want to see the little flecks of light in this shape. I wanted to see it just as a shape, just as a dark shape. Remember, I'm not after making a painting here. Hopefully I will get something, you know, when it comes a little way through, I'll get something which will look something like what's there. If you squint, you know, it should look something like it. But it won't have any of the details. So it's mostly about learning. What colours did Issak Levitan use to paint this tree? And I love this one because, partly because I've been painting a lot of trees lately. And it's such a beautiful painting of a tree. I suspect that a lot of this was done in the studio because it's so carefully done and so slowly done. Now, it's entirely possible that he did it in a number of sessions, you know, but it looks very much to me like at least some of it was done in the studio. And I imagine you could get to a point where if you've been doing this for a long time, you know, painting a lot of trees outdoors, where you kind of think, well, I pretty much, I can make this bit up because I know how, you know, I pretty much know how trees look there. So sometimes I will come back from a plein air session and I'll fiddle a little bit with the painting because now we've got cameras. So what I think is a good compromise is take a photo of what it is that you're painting near the beginning, you know, just when you're starting. So I'm going to make this all one shape because I've got a shadow, again, a shadow on the trunk and a shadow in the foliage. So I'm going to make that all one shape. Now this part here is tricky because it's kind of a middle value and it could be light or dark. I'm going to generally say it's dark though, at least this part here. Yeah, so when you're painting, you things do change. But a photo can still be useful for showing you some detail that you don't have time to catch. You know, it's good for that. Should we put this branch in? Let's put this branch in just as a kind of an anchor. Dark shape there. That will do it, I think. Apart from this, these are all the dark areas. Apart from this, we've got mostly middle and light. So I'll show you, actually this is the one I did today. It's, I went out determined to do a fairly simple painting today, just to paint a single tree. So I painted this willow. And I started it exactly like this. I roughed out where this shape is going to be in that one. This is a pile of something. This is a shadow, shadow side of the tree because the light is coming from the top right, mostly from the right, you know. It's quite low at this time of year anyway. Put in all of the dark shapes, then put in the light shapes, then worked a little bit in between them. So I kind of feel like I stayed a bit too long and I worked too long on this, and I should have stopped sooner because it was just going to be a colour study. And as far as the colours go, you know, I'm really happy with how it came out. Jason, he says, oh, Gamboge, what Gamboge is brighter and warmer than most yellow ochres. What does brighter mean? Lighter? Warmer must mean more orange, I suppose. But you may mean higher chroma. You know, I'm a Munsell nerd, so I try and put everything in terms of like, is it chroma we're talking about, or is it hue or value? So I like yellow ochre because it's lower chroma, you know. So all I'm interested in from a colour is how is it going to work in mixes. I'm not interested in what colour it is. I'm interested in how useful it is to control a mix, you know, what direction I can take a mix in. And I'm finding that yellow ochre is useful, particularly because it's quite low chroma. Otherwise, I would have to mix it, which I totally could do. You know, I could mix this with cad yellow, raw umber, and possibly transparent red oxide. But, you know, the amount of time it would take me to mix that colour, it's just, for plein air especially, it's just useful to have it there. JJ Woody says, one thing I've learned through my plein air efforts is that the process, the challenge of working out in nature and being forced to abbreviate a scene into a visual forces you to be more definitive. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so ChromaMagic does a load of stuff. I mean, it's basically made by a painter for painters, and it's insanely useful. I still personally find, like, if I want to simplify a scene, the best approach still is to squint. That's interesting, though. Michelle says it has a softening feature that can take some of the detail out. I mean, learning to squint, at the end of the day, you're still going to, if you ever want to work from life, and I personally, I strongly recommend that you do both. You know, if you work from photos, do a bit of working from life as well. I'm not religious about it. I don't think you should only ever work from life, and working from photos is bad. I don't think that. I used to, but I don't now. But I think it's good to do both. You know, because it is a very different experience, and it forces you to think about things differently. But there are things that you can do. In Photoshop and stuff like that, there are various filters you can put on that will kind of simplify things and give you like almost like a version of squinting. But it's still, you know, it's still really good. Just, it's such a basic part of painting, just to learn to squint, to simplify the values. I'm thinking about where I'm going to go next. I think I'm going to start putting in some of these colors, I think. Oh, actually, what I meant to do, I noticed when I was looking at this image, if you look in the top right-hand corner, you can see that he painted it on a very lightly toned, like this part of the reference photo. You can see that he painted on a fairly lightly toned support. I don't know what the support is for this, probably canvas, I suppose. And he hasn't actually painted the sky first. So at the top areas, he hasn't put the sky in yet. So he's gradually working the sky in as he goes, which I thought was interesting because, again, accepted plein air wisdom is that you put the sky in first and then key everything from that. But I think there does come a point where you've got enough experience to just say, well, you know, I know what that value is going to be, so I'm just going to put that in. I wonder if I can, what I might do is bring up ChromaMagic and show you. It's probably going to be more useful rather than just painting this. If I bring ChromaMagic up, and I think I can have it like off to the side so we can see. Yeah, and then you can kind of see live like which bits I'm looking at and how I'm using it to kind of find the colors. I think that's going to be more useful. Even just if I only get as far as showing you the process, you know. So you can, as I was saying, you can click around. Am I on color here? So I like to look at this image. this little swatch here I like to look at. What colour am I seeing around here? You know, it's going to change. There's quite a few different ones, and I tend to look at it mostly visually, but I want this all to be one block. Obviously, it's quite a bit lighter over here, so I'm looking for generally what it is. The first thing I'm looking at is the value. Like, generally, what value am I finding here? It's mostly about a value 3. So, value scale to the rescue. So this is the Munsell value scale, which corresponds to the values that you're seeing in ChromaMagic. So value 3 is here, right? So if I mix something, a color that's that value, I'm going to get the values right, which is a great start, right? So let's mix like a value 3. Now that's a bluer green. Ooh, this palette is quite a bit smaller than the one I normally use. That's a bluer green. So the way I would start with that is I begin with green gold. You need quite a bit of this. And then it wants to be a little bit more of a blue-green, so I'd bring in some cobalt. So this is another way that I'd use the cobalt apart from skies. Mix those together, see what I've got. Because the green gold is a very yellow green, so the cobalt helps to take it more kind of a bit more blue. Both of these are expensive colors though. I mean, there are cheaper ways to get to that mix, but not necessarily quicker. And then I bring in a bit of white to bring it up to about a value 3. I reckon it probably still wants to be a little bit more blue than that. So this is something I've been thinking about a lot when I've been doing plein air. Like if you look at, I'll compare it actually in a moment after I put this down. I was going to show the painting that I was doing today because it has a very similar shadow color. Is it a value 3? Let's check. It's a little bit, no, it's about right. It's about a value 3. It's about a value 3. So let's stick some of that down. Wipe this brush off. But I'm going to paint it like really, really simply. So, and it looks really dark, right? But that's because we've got a white panel. So I'm just going to paint all of this, pretty much this color here. We're going to go a little bit darker there, so I won't use it there. It's a bit lower chroma as well. I know it gets lighter there, but I'm not that bothered about that. Just kind of stick it in. And the light color, average I'm finding, it's like about a value 6, value 7. You know, you'll get various kind of different values as you click around. I'm probably going to go, like I'd said, the average is about a 6. So I'm going to go for about a value 6. So let's mix that color. And this is literally how I would do it when working from life. You know, this is the thought process that I'd go through. Like, what big color can I use in that area there that's going to be about right? Let's start with white. Put some green gold in. See where we are. To yellow. Green gold is a really, really yellow green. It's incredibly useful for autumn light because everything, especially if you're painting in the evening or in the morning, everything is very yellow. I think it's something to do, even in the middle of the day, it's very yellow. And I think it's something to do with, I'm going to bring some of that green yellow in. It's something to do with, the sun being lower in the sky even during the day. So I want about a value 7 for this. Or did I say no 6? Did I say 6 or 7? I can't remember. About a 6 probably. 6 to a 7, say that might be a little bit light, but I think it's probably about right. So if I want to have a little bit more chroma, I'll use the Aralide yellow, which is a green yellow with cobalt, a little bit of cobalt, and that will give me a much higher chroma green, right? So I have within my palette the capability to make much higher chroma greens, but Generally speaking, I find it's very rare that you want to be pushing up to the full chroma, especially in greens when you're painting outside. So this is probably about right. Let's just pop this in, get a fresh brush, and see how these colours look. I think that's too dark. I'm going to bring it a little bit higher value with some white. But the chroma is not the highest chroma that I can get. I could go higher chroma, but it would look less natural. And I think it's a thing, like I've been looking at a lot of, I'm basically a fan of Russian landscape painting, both, you know, older landscape painting and contemporary. There's some amazing Russian landscape painters still working now, you know, within that kind of tradition. I think that's too yellow. I think this is probably too yellow as well. Let's change this now before we go any further. I think the chroma is about right. I think the value is about right, but I think it's a little bit on the yellow side in comparison to the photo. But it's also, I mean, one of the problems with doing stuff like this from a photo is that you don't know. There's no way of knowing what, unless you've actually been to see it, what the original painting looks like. You know, you're guessing. More blue. And if you look for this painting, it's called the Oak, I think, The Oak by Issak Levitan, and you look for it online, you'll see some wildly different interpretations, let's say, of the original painting. You know, I chose the WikiMedia Commons one because I think it's probably the closest, and I tried to find one that was kind of an average, you know. Some of them are really, really, like they've obviously treated the photograph and pushed the chroma right up. It was a little bit lighter and a bit more yellow around here. Which is a shame, you know, because like, you know, selling reproductions of it on Etsy or whatever, they really push the chroma and the colors just look totally wrong. See, I think this could probably be a bit bluer too. And this is like the learning process in action is at this point, you know, finding out how to mix these colors. What I've been thinking a lot lately, like, you know, about the kind of different palettes that people would recommend that you use. And basically, the best palette is the one that you know. So the split primary palette will work for you. You know, there are a lot of different palettes that will work fine for you. I'm overdoing the blue now because it's going to mix with what's there and I want it to go a lot more blue. You can make almost any palette work. A lot of the theories that people have behind the palettes that they choose, like the split primary one, the theory is a load of old nonsense, basically, but it does have what you basically need is a palette that will have a fairly wide gamut, meaning that you can mix a wide range of colors with it. And then after that, you just need to practice with it and learn it so that you know it well. And you know what you can mix with it. And how to mix it. And this is a great way to learn a palette. You know, it's a great way to learn a selection of colors. So this, the palette, the color choices that I've got here, probably people would have a lot of different choices about some of the colors, you know, but it doesn't ultimately matter too much. As long as it's got a wide enough gamut and you can hit what you need with it. Right, it gets quite a bit darker here with the, let's check that, what's that there? It's like, it's like a value 1, it's almost black. So it's difficult to see the chroma anyway, and the color here. So if you want to use, you can use the primary palette with only 3 colors if you want. I mean, good luck with that for plein air painting. You're going to spend a lot of time mixing if you don't have any earths with you. And also there will be some colors that you simply cannot get. A lot of colors you can get, but there'll be some that you can't. Split primary palette gives you a wider gamut, and that palette is fine if you know it well. If you know it and you can mix what you need quickly, then that will work for you. So I'm basically using the blue against the cobalt blue against the green gold to swing it, the colors a little bit more towards blue or a little bit more towards yellow, the greens. So I know this palette very well because I've been using it for years for painting still life paintings. So, you know, I don't have to think too much about it. I know how to mix a lot of the colors that I want to mix here with this. As I say, the main difference in this over what I would normally have on my palette is I've got both whites, and I've added cobalt blue and yellow ochre. Occasionally I'll have quinacridone rose if I want a really strong orange, which I can then get with cad yellow and orange, but it's quite rare really that I need that. Not looking too bad. It's definitely a good shout, sending those colours more blue. Gets a little bit lighter here, just at the base of the tree, so I'm going to add a bit more colour here. Notice though that I'm not actually trying to make these brush strokes descriptive. I'm just interested in learning about the colour. That's all I'm doing. Part of the problem as well is I'm sharing my Mac screen. Part of the difficulty, let's say, with doing this as a live stream is I'm sharing my Mac screen to my main computer, which I stream from. And the colour comes out slightly different. Let's have a closer look at it, how it looks on there. Yeah, the colour comes out a little bit more, I could say, a little bit bluer and a little bit higher chroma, or more saturated, if you will. So if I turn that off, let's leave it like this for a bit, because those colours are actually closer to what I'm seeing on my screen here that I'm looking to match. Francis says, why didn't Paul tint the panel first? Honestly, because I forgot. I was going to do it. I did mean to do it. It would also mean, however, that I would have wet paint on there. So it doesn't really matter. You know, what I'm not looking to do here is a master copy. That's something different, which takes a lot more time. You know, I'm just looking to learn something about his colour. So this is really interesting to me already. So that's fairly close to what's there in the image. And if I compare it to what I got today when I was out, it's a very similar thing. You know, I'm in Northern Europe and I was painting sunlight on grass, different time of year, but I was still painting sunlight on grass with light and shadow, not a million miles away, actually. You know, so I'm one of the things that it's difficult to see when you're out and you're looking at something directly. It's like, what color is that shadow exactly? You can kind of get the value. Is it more a blue-green? You know, what's the difference between the green here, which actually isn't a green at all, it's a yellow, it's an orange really, and this green here, like what's the difference? And you could say it's the temperature. I like to think about that in terms of hue, because temperature can, perceived temperature can change depending on the hue and the chroma and what a colour is next to. It's a very vague term, so I like to think that this is more a blue-green and that's more a yellow-green. In fact, it's actually an orange. Most of it is an orange up here. I had to change that while I was painting. But I've chosen fairly similar colours to Levitan's in the sense that this is slightly more yellow in the light, and a slightly more blue-green of a similar value in the shadow areas. So that kind of gives me some heart that, you know, I'm not a million miles away. Oh, that's interesting. Rena says New Gamboge is a high value, high chroma, mid to slight orange yellow. So now you're talking terms I understand, right? That's a bit of Munsell on there. I know what you're talking about. But it's very transparent. Ah, okay. So one of the nice things about yellow ochre is it is very opaque. So you can cover things pretty well with it if you've got it in a mix. That's nice. So, is that that's a YouTube handle that I can't say, but she says trees are like people, they have personality. I like to observe them and paint. Yeah, they do have personality. Kind of everything really has a certain amount of personality to it, doesn't it, really? Little pots, you know, I like to paint little pots, and I kind of think that they have a personality to them too. I think it might be a little bit low chroma here. Maybe I need a little bit more chroma. I'm in two minds about that. I'm also trying to match it's kind of complicated to do it this way because I'm trying to match the exposure of the camera with the photo as well at the same time. I think my camera exposure is a bit high. Let's bring that down. That affects it too. So it's a bit of a juggling act, trying to broadcast something and have it look the same as what I'm seeing here. Maybe a little bit more chroma. Let's play a little bit more. And a bit more arylide yellow. This area here I'm thinking about might want a bit more chroma. It definitely goes off a little bit more yellow and a little bit lighter over to the right. This area here. See, just little bits like this I get really fascinated about. You know, like just trying to think like, you know, how much chroma has he used there and why? Endlessly fascinating. I love doing these kind of studies. Even if you only do like a small area, it's really interesting to learn about. Yeah, so Michelle says, I like to recommend alternating painting using ChromaMagic and then from life. I learnt the most that way. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then what you learn from painting with ChromaMagic and from using photo reference informs what you're working on from life and vice versa. I mean, one of the main things that I notice, the difference between working from photographs and working from life is that photographs tend to exaggerate the difference between lights and darks. So when we look at a shadow in a scene, we look into the shadow and we can see color and detail in the shadow that a photograph will miss. And there are kind of ways around it. You know, you can, what I do a lot is I take my photos into Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, and it has some sliders for adjusting the values there, and you can just bring up the value of the shadows. And I do that quite a lot. So Atelier Goose Boomer, that's quite a name, says, why did some painters like Shishkin paint trees on white canvas? The Flemish built landscapes on earth tones, much like you would paint your still life paintings on raw umber. Well, I mean, a lot of people paint still life paintings on a white panel. The Impressionists mostly, from what I understand, used to like working on white. I mean, the main difference is if you work on white and you want higher chroma, it's easier to get higher chroma color. So for this one, Levitan has worked on a light canvas, but it's you know, it's slightly knocked back. So you only really it just, if you're working like on a totally white panel like this, it's hard to see the value relationships until you get it all filled in. You know, with something like using something like ChromaMagic makes it a lot easier, and a value scale, as long as you've got your value scale to translate from ChromaMagic to the real world values, you'll pretty much know that you've got your values right, you know. Catherine says, do you ever use a grid for plein air? Yeah, I do actually. I'll show you it. Assuming it didn't blow away and I've still got it. It's not exactly a grid, it's a little bit wobbly. I mean, this is basically the same size. It's just foam core with thread, which has now gone loose with use. But the ones I'm most interested are the central ones, you know. And it can help for drawing out. And this is basically the same size as a 5x7 panel. You know, fits in that pretty much perfectly. Yeah, so for mixing greens, like one really reliable way you can do it, which might surprise you, is with ivory black. I'll just show you the mix. An arylite yellow, and that basically will give you a really, really nice green, slightly on the yellow side. So I can push that more towards blue with some cobalt. And if you want higher chroma and you want it to go towards blue, put some phthalo green in there and it will become really, really powerful. You know, I was, to start with, I did take out phthalo green with me, but I found I wasn't using it very much. Most of the greens, a lot of what I've been doing outside has been readjusting, recalibrating my eye for lower chroma, not higher. Okay, I'm going to put in some more colours. I think I fancy kind of going into, probably into the tree a little bit now. Get some of this in and then get some of the value. Oh no, actually I'll do the trunk. Let's do the trunk next. So again, I'm just going to be thinking about light and shadow. So, oh, all of my white has become contaminated now. This is something that I find that I do when I'm painting. I've got into the habit of doing painting plein air as I mix with the brush, which I don't often do in the studio. I'm a lot more careful and precise. So light, it's actually slightly yellow, but it's very, very low chroma. So raw umber is a yellow orange. So I'm going to put in a little bit of yellow orange, a little bit of raw umber. I want the chroma to be very low, and I want to bring the value down just a little bit. I'm going to put in a tiny amount of yellow ochre as well. Send it slightly yellow, and actually it's going to need a little bit of green gold. That should do for the light. Shadow color. It's just, most of it is just a little bit lighter than pure raw umber. So I'm just going to start with raw umber and bring a little bit of white into it, just to raise the value a little bit. If this was titanium white I was putting in this, it would also drop the chroma, which is one of the reasons I don't like to use titanium white for most mixes. And I would have to correct it by putting something else in it. That should be pretty good, just for like a general. We'll put the shadow in first. That's all this area here. Some parts of it will want to be a little bit darker than this, I think, but we'll just, this is all tree trunk. This is not, this part here is foliage. Yes, I've been thinking I've been missing doing the Friday lives. I miss connecting with people, and it's kind of, I feel it's like my, to be honest, I kind of see it as like, it's my public service thing that I do. And I've been missing not doing it so much, so I think I really want to get back to it. But I think inevitably, because I'm doing mostly like a lot of landscape painting at the moment, and plein air especially, it's probably going to influence what I'm doing on Friday Lives. And sometimes it might be just something that I was going to do anyway, like something like this. I'm going to get a fresh brush for the light. There's actually really two colours in the light. There's a slightly darker one as well, so I'll put this lighter area in first, which is just on this side of the trunk. It's kind of hard to read the direction of the light in this painting because within this tree trunk, there isn't a lot of form on this light part. There isn't a lot of shadow. I suspect it's slightly from the left because there's just a hint of shadow here down this part of the tree trunk. Slightly darker area, I'm going to just mix a little bit between the two. Down this side, there's a slightly darker bit. So it's really, really simple. I'm not trying to make the painting, you know, necessarily. I'm just trying to figure out what colours he's used and then mix them. Got a very dark, slightly more blue-green by the side of the tree there. All around here, actually. And this dark area at the top of the tree here, we're pretty much, I mean, that's almost black really up there. Not particularly interested in all of the branches or any of that. I just want to get the colours for the tree trunk in. But that's a really, really wide difference in values between the light and the shadow. This is almost as dark as you can get in paint. That's like a value 2 in Munsell terms, and that's about a value 8. So that's a really, really wide range of values. Let's just finish off this little bit of that colour in there. What a brilliant idea. So Arena says, I often do. Arena, if anybody doesn't know, by the way, is a really, really good painter. And we have a few really good painters here. You should check out her work, Arena Sean, if you want to see. And Arena, you've been doing some really nice little still lifes, not still lifes, sorry, plein air paintings lately. Seen you post a couple on the community lately. I haven't been, now I'm busier painting again, it's more difficult for me to keep up with the community, but you've, that last one you put up of the tree was gorgeous. Anyway, I'm getting off the point. She says, I often do a master copy using ChromaMagic and then set up a similar still life to work from life to learn. What a good idea. What a really good idea. Hippopotamus Bosch. Still one of my favourite ever YouTube handles, says, looks like mid-daylight with light behind the painter, very flat forms. I agree, yeah, I think so. I think it's behind and slightly to the left of him when he was painting this. See, I imagine when he painted this that he started with a painting outside, maybe went back to the same place multiple times, or finished it in the studio, one or the other. What do you reckon? That's what it looks like to me. One of the things you have to be careful when you're doing this, though, is just taking the same colour over too large an area if it's not actually there. So that the light part of the top of the tree is slightly darker. The trunk, I'm talking specifically about the trunk, sorry, here. Let me bring up ChromaMagic again because I want to show you how I'm doing this. The colour is slightly off, but it's more chromatic and slightly more blue. It's just a thing to do with like sharing my screen from one laptop to my main PC. It's changing the colour a little bit. I have to do some experimenting to try and get the colour right. So bear in mind that the colour's slightly out now on the photo, but if I'm looking around in here, I'll make the sample size smaller because I'm dealing with a smaller area. So what you can do as well with ChromaMagic is you can actually zoom right in. Yay! How cool is that? So, you know, this is telling me that this is a value 6 here, right? This part of the tree near the top in the light is a value 6. I can click around and have a look. Pretty much a value 6. Low chroma. Kind of a yellow-orange, right? So, with a value scale, I can get really, really close to that. So here's my value scale. There's my value 6. Let's get that yellow out of my white. So if I start off with some white, bit of raw umber in there, mix of value 6. That's probably a little bit too low in chroma, so I'm going to bring a tiny bit of raw of yellow ochre in that, sorry, to give it a bit more chroma. So this is where I use yellow ochre a lot in mixes like this. Little bit light still. So just raw umber and white will be losing. I would be losing too much chroma, so I can add a little bit in. Because basically raw umber and yellow ochre are very, very similar colours in that they are both yellow oranges. One is darker and lower chroma, the raw umber, and one is lighter and higher chroma. So you can change mixes pretty nicely. You know, they work well in that they give you similar hue at different chromas, like across the value range. So that should be about a 6 now. It's about a value 6. Let's put that in and see how it looks. Dark, right? Because we're judging it against white, the white of the panel. This is why it can be a lot nicer to work on a toned panel. So it'd probably be a good idea to fill in some of the values around the tree. Let's get on to the general values of the trees. So for the lighter value, you know, I want to find a color that I can use. You know, here I'm seeing like the value is about 5. Is it higher anywhere? It's giving me a nice general one. If I make the sample size bigger, still telling me about 5 for these light areas. About a middle value, right? What about over here in the shadow? Dark, like that's like a value 2. Here it's a little bit lighter. No, it's still saying about a 2. And this is, it's a very similar color actually. Slightly lower chroma, but still kind of bluish to the color that we had down here. You know, that's a bit lighter, so it's a bit darker. These shadow areas here are darker than what we've got at the bottom here. And a little bit lower chroma as well. So I've got the color, you know, pretty much that I used there. So it's this time I want a lower value, so I'm going to start with black. I'm going to bring in a little bit of the Arrowlight yellow to send it, bring the value up a little bit and send it green. Arrowlight yellow is, this is bright yellow lake. Another similar one is Hansa yellow, which you might see a lot. It's an organic pigment, so it's transparent, but it's very high chroma. It's a greenish yellow. So it goes well with the cad yellow because that gives you a range of yellows that you can mix at high chroma at the top of the value range. If you want to go more green, or you want to go more towards an orange green or a blue green, you've got that there. I'm going to bring some blue into that because it's a little bit too yellow. And the value I want is about a 2. Pretty dark. Actually, I don't think I've got enough there. I'm going to need more. So this is like, you know, a really valuable exploration into how to mix greens. You know, I'm using obviously this palette that I've got here. If you had a different palette with different colors and you had to mix all of these greens, it will show you if you can do it with your palette. And if you're really struggling to get to a green, it may well just be that you can't do it with the colors that you've got on your palette. You know, that might be a problem. Some cobalt, send it a bit more blue. So it's a little bit too dark. I'm going to lighten it with the Arrowlight yellow, not with white, because that will tend to send it lower chroma and more towards grey. A bit dark still. So as I lighten it with yellow, I have to bring more blue back in because that's obviously sending it towards a more of a yellow green. Could get there really quick by just putting in a little bit of phthalo. But as I say, I've found I generally can get away with, as long as I've got the cobalt blue, that allows me to send low chroma greens more blue. The problem is if I wanted a really high chroma blue-green, I couldn't really do it. But I've yet to find that in nature. That's part of the reason I'm not using it. You can get also with the phthalo green, you can get incredibly lurid high value greens with the Arrowlight yellow and the phthalo green. They're just off the chart. But I'll show you actually, just for interest's sake. But you just don't want that color most of the time. So this is Winsor Newton, Windsor Green, which is just a phthalo basically. And if you look at what I'm about to mix on my palette against everything else that I've got. Phthalo green, Arrowlight yellow. It's not often you need that. When nature doesn't use that colour for very much. very, very intense. That's why I took phthalo off, although I do have phthalo sometimes. I use it a lot for like higher chroma, very low value blue-greens like the leaves of roses and things like that. So that'll probably do it. A bit more blue. I'm going to mix a slightly lighter value one next to it as well. So the blue, cobalt blue and arylite yellow gives you a nice blue-green without the chroma going like off the scale, which it does if you put the phthalo in. I'm going to get a fresh brush for this. About a value 2, so I can check it on my value scale that it's about a value 2, it's about right. And that's like all around this area here. This is all the shadow. Very simplified shapes though, you know, I'm not bothered about doing a copy of the painting. But if I was, I would start it the same way. Just work into it more. Spend longer on it. I mean, this could still become, you know, I don't think it's going to. I don't think I want to go that far with it, but it could still become a copy. It's a little bit lighter out here. I'm going to bring in a little bit of white. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. The light is, bringing it up with white brings the value up, but I lose too much chroma, so I'll put back in some arylite yellow and some cobalt to bring the chroma back in. And then over here, as we get back to the trunk, it gets darker again. So again, there's a lot of variation within those shapes that I'm not interested in putting in. Where else have we got dark? Actually, this comes down a little bit lower, I think, and bring that down to about there. And it almost meets this kind of darker shadow shape around here. Bit of shadow here, nicely placed to show off the light of the trunk, which nature does really nicely sometimes, and sometimes you have to make it up. We don't know which one he did. Slightly darker behind here to show the trunk. And this is interesting because at this point, the shadow of the trunk and the shadow of the tree are almost the same value, and they kind of merge. This is why I like to do, at the beginning, I like to do the shadow, rough the shadow shapes out merged. Because at this point, you can only see the difference between them in terms of the hue and the chroma of the colour. So what did I say for the light color? We were after like about a value 5-ish. It's not massively high chroma. I'm going to start with green gold. I'm going to bring quite a lot of blue into it because that's going to be too yellow. And then I'm going to bring in the green yellow, the arrowline yellow, to bring it up. Then bring some white in. A lot of the greens in here are quite bluish, actually. I'm kind of surprised how bluish they are, given that it's a sunny day. But then this would have been painted, I assume. It looks very much like summer. So it may be that there's kind of a general bluish hue from, if a lot of this part of the tree is in semi-shadow, like there will be some reflected light from the blue of the sky on there. Whereas where the sun hits more directly on the grass below the tree, it's more yellow. A bit more blue. I'm going slightly lighter than a value 5. I wonder if a lot of my greens are tending to, I'm having to pull them back and make them a little bit more blue. And I wonder if it's because I've been painting in the autumn a lot. I mean, I've only recently started doing quite a bit of plein air painting. And I've been doing it, you know, obviously recently, so that's mostly in the autumn. It looks like maybe it's a little bit dark still. Some parts of it are still quite light. Oh, my other dog has come. Hello, Tansy. What do you want? Someone to play with, I bet. So this area here is kind of in between the two, the shadow and the light. Just mix between them and fill that area in. There are basically, for any color that isn't a really, really high chroma, there are innumerable ways to mix it. So personally, I think people worry a little bit too much about this palette or that palette and whether you should be using these colors or those colors on your palette. Painters especially, like, you know, really obsessive about it. And you see, or I have seen in the past when I used to hang out on them, I don't know, on art forums, the most incredible arguments. You know, I mean, they don't take any prisoners about which colors you should be using and which palette is better. And, you know, no, it's the CMYK palette that will solve all of your color problems, someone once said to me. And then I mentioned a couple of colors that you can't mix with that color, that palette. And she was like, oh, yeah, right. You know, it's the CMYK palette. If you're obsessed with using a primary palette, God knows why, because primary pertains to light, not paint. Primaries make sense if you're using additive color like light. That don't make any sense at all when you're using subtractive color mixing, which is what we do with paint. Anyway, I digress. It doesn't matter. You can use the CMYK palette. Perfectly good palette. It's got a really wide range. You know, if you had like a CMYK palette and then come back to the real world of painting and add, like, you know, a couple of earths, raw umber, maybe yellow ochre, transparent red oxide, maybe, just to allow you to, and black, to allow you to drop chroma and get to more realistic color more quickly. You know, that would be really useful. That would be a pretty good palette. You know, what matters is that you can get to the colors that you need without making it more difficult for yourself. And, you know, a lot of the time, strict adherence to a specific palette, it just makes it more difficult. So a lot of these colors now are like in between. I think overall the greens are looking fairly good. So I'm mixing a little bit in between these colours, you know, to kind of, to get a little bit closer, if you like.
Hello, Dad. Oh, you stream.
Yeah, I'm live. It's all right. Everybody's come to see me today. Anyway, we can see like we're starting to get, I think these colours are looking pretty decent. We're starting to get reasonably close to the colours that are in there now. So there are a lot of very small differences in hue and chroma of some of these greens, which I'm mostly ignoring. You know, I want to get just a general impression. No, the dogs want out. And then we get a little bit lighter all around here. So I'm trying to see these just as blocks. And this in itself is a useful skill to develop, to be able to simplify down and take something which is a number of different colours and see it just as a single block. Dog's trying to break the door down and get out. Because this is basically what you do when you're painting. You start like this, painting plein air, and then you add more as you go. I know I'm coming. He's just standing looking at me and wagging his tail. I know, big boy, I'm coming. Just give me a minute. Poor little fellow, I've got to let him out. Go on then. So just so you know, to warn you, Friday live plein airs are probably going to become rather more like this, and just the stuff that I normally do, and possibly with a lot of interruptions from dogs and people. Serena says, I'm just noticing the foliage in the back compared to the main tree in the front. The light shape is just slightly more blue and less saturated, but the same value. Gives the sense of slight distance. Yes, indeed. I've been finding that a lot. Dropping the chroma of colours that are in the background, that you want to push them further away, is a really, really effective way of showing distance. More effective than, you know, I mean, it is atmospheric perspective, but people generally say, oh, you mix more blue into it, make it more blue. And that only happens, I found, on particular days when there's a lot of, it's very humid and there's a lot of moisture in the air and all those little droplets are reflecting the blue of the sky. A lot of the time, if it's not humid, it will be a drop in chroma mostly that shows that distance, more than anything else. It's an amazing painting, this. You know, Levitan is such a good painter. I mean, obviously, I'm partly looking at this painting and wanting to do a colour study of it because it means that I'll also spend quite a lot of time just looking at it, basically, and thinking about how he did it. Like, it's very interesting to me that he painted the sky into the tree rather than painted the sky first and then painted the tree. You know, that's kind of perhaps not how you would assume that it would be done. You know, like a lot of plein air painters will recommend that you key in the sky first. So we're starting to get, you know, if I stand back and I squint, I'm beginning to feel this shadow into the light here. His values are superb. You know, there's no doubt about it that this is someone who really understands how to use value and how to use paint. Obs, right? It's Levitan. But, you know, it's just good to see and to learn that. To think about how he's using those values. Like even a really, really simplified version like this, I'm beginning to feel this moving back into shadow there. You can feel the tree moving back. I want to put a little bit of the blue of the sky in just so I can see, kind of get an impression of how that's working against all of the other colours that we've got here. I want to put just a couple of these little dark accents in just to show this, that this is a separate form. And these little trees, like even these little trees are very strongly simplified into light and shadow shapes. And within that, there's a lot of complexity. What an amazing painting. This is interesting. There's a very kind of bluish, I'm going to put it in, bluish green around here. It becomes light and very blue. And there's a couple of bits up here as well. Let's put those in. I wonder why. Seems slightly, just a slight hue change where the green of the light of the foliage has gone a little bit kind of lighter there. I'm going to scrub in, just let me put in some of this here. This is when it starts to get really interesting, when more of it is filled in. And you can start to see, you know, it starts to come to life, like this green is working now. I'm going to use a very generic colour, a brownish, low chroma brownish green, just to fill in these areas, and then I'm going to put the sky in, and we'll see how that works against the other colours. The main problem with Viridian, I mean, that's basically phthalo. Viridian is phthalo. A lot of paint makers use different names for it, but, you know, Windsor green is Viridian is phthalo. Is if you get it on your dog, it takes a long time to get it out. My dog still has a little bit of phthalo blue, and he's a Labradoodle, so our big dog, Teddy, our rescue dog. And I think it's probably always going to be there until eventually we get him clipped. Not to get the paint out, just because, you know, they need it every now and again. So I'm going to mix a kind of a generic sort of a brownish green, low chroma to show the distance, as Arena was saying, light-ish, about a value 6-ish probably. A little bit of, it's mostly raw umber and white. Put a little bit of green gold in to give it a little bit of chroma. It's not going to be exactly the colour that's there, but I just want something which is going to, that was a bit much, is going to push those kind of side areas back, but close to the colour that I can see, but just rough it in really generally. less chroma. That's better. Just realised I've got no idea how long we've been on. How long have we been on? Oh, an hour and a half, more than an hour and a half. There you go. I was thinking that this might be about an hour, but I've got lost in the process of mixing colours and laying them down, which is nice, you know. Another thing about doing these things is they're kind of meditative, you know. Mostly, I just want to fill in these areas with a very general colour in order to cover more of the panel, you know, so we can see those colours better. I think overall, like looking at my tree, I want to bring in some values in between. Mostly like closer to the dark. I think I've been a little bit shy with my dark areas, and they need to come into the light areas more. The light areas of the tree are actually fairly small. In a lot of ways. Probably smaller than I first thought. I'm cutting into them with darker values now. I think I may, or ChromaMagic was telling me a value 5, and I thought that was a little bit low, so I actually pushed them up a little bit, and now I'm actually thinking probably nearer a 6, and now I'm thinking maybe I was wrong, and ChromaMagic was right. There you go, Michelle. I should have been closer to a 5. This is a little bit darker down here. This is the part of a painting where I like it when I get to this point where a lot more of it is covered. The same, the experience is very, very similar to painting outdoors. When more of the painting is covered and you can start to see it better, how all of the colours are relating to each other, it makes a big difference. This is very strongly, even just a really simple version of the painting like this, you very strongly feel that like a lot of the impact of this painting is the tree trunk and the light, the feeling of light there, and that's all down to the values on the chroma there. Strong feeling of light on the trunk. Let's try and get some little bit of blue in. Hello, JB. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Like, as I say, I've done a lot of these. I'm itching to show you them, but I really can't because a lot of the ones that I've done are, as I say, they're basically from living painters. But do what I do. You know, any painting that you like the look of, just download it from Pinterest, take it into ChromaMagic, and learn about the colours. You know, take them as examples of what you can do. Learn about what the artists use to make those paintings. Learn how to mix those greens. You know, you can learn a huge amount that way. I was particularly interested for this one in learning like what these greens are, and one of the main things that I've learned is, the first thing I've learned is that he's using very similar values to me, so I kind of feel exonerated, I suppose, in a way, that when I go out and I'm doing plein air, that a lot of the time my values are pretty good. As I say, it may be partly because this is a painting done in summertime, and I've been painting mostly in autumn. But for sure, my greens are tending a lot more towards yellow, and I've pushed these. I've had to push these greens a lot more towards blue to get close to the kind of colours that he's using. And that in itself is something useful to learn, to find out, you know. And I will certainly do some more Levitan paintings and some paintings by others. Actually, if there's any you'd like to see me do, any painters you would like to see me do colour studies of, drop the names in the chat, either that, or if you're on my email list and you've got my email, just email me. So up here at the top, this is basically what he toned the canvas with. But I imagine that eventually, I mean, this painting is obviously unfinished, and I imagine that eventually he would have got to a point where he would have painted it in. But what's interesting to me is that up here, if you look at the original, he's actually started putting in the leaves. And yet he hasn't done the sky yet, you know, so he's painting the sky like around the leaves, which is really, really interesting way to approach it. I'm going to put some of that sky colour in now. So it's kind of what you'd expect for a summer day. It's very, very light, not a lot of blue in there. It's fairly low chroma. I'm going to start with titanium white, put in a little bit of cobalt blue. That was too much. And I'm also going to put in, I usually do this, who am I kidding? I always do it. I put in a little bit of the arylide yellow. You've got to be careful not to put too much, because I found that cobalt by itself, that was maybe a little bit too much. Cobalt by itself is too blue. And, oh dear, I've got some green in it. I'll have to start again. Skies oftentimes tends slightly towards green. So just a straight cobalt blue. I mean, it will work. It will be fine. But trust me on this, I have a highly evolved colour sense from working with Munsell and trying to do some very, very exact mixing for like about 20 years. And the skies do go slightly towards a green-blue. Very small amount, but it is there. And as you get down towards the horizon, they get lighter. And sometimes the chroma will drop. So one thing I've seen plein air painters do is to mix a little bit of orange in, you know, with white as it goes down to the horizon. But what that's actually doing is it's a kind of complement mixing. So it's dropping the chroma and raising the value with the white. You know, so I'd prefer to think of it in, rather than think, oh, this is something that you can do with the sky that I've seen plein air painters do. I want to know why. I want to know the effect of the colour. And the effect of the colour is, the effect of the mix is, it sends it slightly more neutral and it raises the value. This should be about right, I think. A little bit dark, possibly. Got a little sky hole here. And another thing that plein air painters often say is to paint your sky holes darker, to the extent that it's like it's a thing. I don't think he's done that here. It's a thing, but it's a thing that it looks to me very much like Levitan didn't really do. That's possibly a bit too blue. And he's started to rough in some sky up here, but he hasn't put it in yet. So if he'd gone all the way up to the top with his sky, it would have gone a little bit more blue, a little bit darker. And if he'd finished the tree up here. So I think he worked on the sky and the tree together. Whether the tree came up against the sky, I think he worked on them together. I don't think he did one and then the other. Over here, actually, it looks like the blue is more blue. Where we've got a few tiny little sky holes, the blue is more blue, and it is a little bit darker. So maybe he did, on this side at least, make his sky holes a little bit darker. And this one would presume would become sky as well, a little bit more sky up there. It's interesting how with such really, kind of simple means, you can actually get pretty close to the overall feeling of the painting. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't trust ChromaMagic on my light greens here, and I think I did go a little bit too dark there. A little bit too light, sorry. They should be a little bit darker, I think. It may also be that there's more detail in there. No, that feels better. They're definitely darker than I painted them. Just mixing up a slightly darker green to paint in here. They're also possibly a little bit too big. And actually, what I'm noticing is, as I bring the value of these light parts of the tree down, relative to them, this part is lighter, so it feels like there's much stronger sunlight coming down and hitting this as a flat plane, which is right, because the sun is high in the sky, right? Because the shadow on this part of the tree is coming down from above. Speaking of which, we can bring, now I can see everything much better, we can bring that value right down there, in that part of the tree. Down to like pure raw umber, and even put a little bit of black in it, like at the darkest part, which should intensify the feeling of light on the light part. I mean, that's a really wide value range that he's used on the trunk of the tree, from very, very dark in the shadows to very, very light. In the light parts. Very interesting. Almost black here. So this is the point of the painting I usually characterize as playing. At the end, all the hard work has been done. The painting has basically been made, and you can afford to spend a little bit of time playing with it and messing and having fun. But it is also time for dinner for me. So I hope this was interesting to you today. And it's possibly given you an idea for something that you can try if you want to learn something about the colour of colour choices of painters and paintings that you really like. This is a nice way to do it. Download the image, stick it into ChromaMagic and see how they did what they did. Just realised that I was zoomed in a little bit on the image, so this is actually entirely in the wrong place. Let's bring that up a little bit. Actually, there's some dark value in there as well, blue-green, bring that in, which will presumably just help this area stand out as being even brighter. The feeling of sun on the grass is very strong. Really like the way he's done that, and it's something that I've found I've done a lot. And I've also got it wrong, like this is a plein air painting that I did, and I put way too much chroma into the grass here. I painted it first, like pretty close to what it is in the Levitan painting, and then I decided it needed more chroma because I was looking at it too much. So I brought the value up and I brought the chroma up, and in the end it took away the brightness of the leaves, the beech tree leaves. So that one is where I got it a little bit wrong, you know. So this is like a good kind of a lesson on how to get it right. Yeah, Levitan painted with a lot of greens. I mean, he's done some incredibly beautiful paintings of the inside of forests and woods that basically they're just all green. You know, it's really, really fascinating that he's done it that way. Huge areas, and like that, the entire painting basically is just shades of green, including the bark of the trees. Just greens of different chromas and different values. A lot of the time, just all blue greens, so they're even very similar greens. You know, the amount of control it takes to do that, the amount of the skill it takes to do that and have it work, it's pretty amazing. I'm just making little adjustments to the overall value blocks here and there at the moment to try and get that. See, a lot of it is, to me, you know, when you look at this painting, you look at I did anyway, I'm like, ooh, that's really nice, all of that foliage is really nicely done. You know, that's what I noticed first. But actually, I think the impact of the painting, kind of what it's about, if you like, is the sun, is this area, the sun on the bark here, which is made very strong by the deep shadows, and the sun on the grass here. This is kind of what creates the light in the painting. If you take that out, you just got a bunch of greens, you know, and it doesn't have such a strong feeling of life and reality. And when you bring that back in, you know, it's nailing these colours here, which has given this painting, to me, so much of its strength and so much of its effect. It's about the light at the bottom of the tree trunk and on the ground. Fliora Tosca says, sorry, Paul, I think your lower tree trunk is too high a value. Yeah. It might be. It might be. It is a little bit lighter than the photo. Do you want me to bring it down a bit? It's difficult. You've got to remember that as well as the painting, I've got to balance my camera exposure, which is This sounds like such a terrible excuse. It is tricky though. It is really tricky. Let's bring it down a little bit. What I haven't done actually is put in, there's a shadow, just a thin shadow on the right hand side of the trunk, which I haven't put in. It's almost grey actually. Just down here, which just shows the trunk turning. But that's good that you noticed that. I mean, that's basically is the process of doing these kind of things, is that you would, that's exactly how you paint. You know, it's like you do, you compare and you see, you know, what you think is out, what might need changing. So don't apologize for it. It's fine. I'm not offended. And you're actually right. You know, it looks closer now. I think I preferred it before though. Add more light on it. Francis says, "Thank you very much, Paul. I'm inspired to do a copy now." Yeah, totally do it. It's really interesting, and ChromaMagic gives you a way to do it. To show, it will even show you what paints you can get, what tube paints you can get, you know, to mix a particular color. But it allows you to see, you know, what color you actually need. And what I haven't shown you today that you can do, if you've got it, the photo open, you know, the original painting open on a phone or on a tablet, you can actually put it on your palette, and if you're careful to balance the light, there's too much for me to go into about how to do that at the moment. I'll demo it. I do have some YouTube videos that demo that. I'll do it on another live stream. You can actually have the color that you're trying to mix there, you know, a swatch of the color on your palette, and you can get really, really close that way. Maybe I'll do another one of these, like, that's a little bit simpler to paint than this one. And take you through some of the other things that you can do with ChromaMagic to really, really nail things. It's an incredible learning tool. You know, I've seen a couple of comments of people getting a bit sniffy about it, saying, "Oh, that's not art." You know, that's like Olympic level missing the point. ChromaMagic is the most incredible learning tool. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful way for you to learn about color. And as Michelle herself, who made it, says, she recommends working from life too. I recommend working from life too. You know, it's like looking at this and saying, "Yeah, that's not art." It's totally not the point. You know, the point is to learn something about the colors that Levitan used and how he used them, and also a little bit about how he put his painting together. You know, how the order that he did it in, you know, it teaches you a little bit about that as well. You know, it's incredibly useful. Like, you know, doing a color copy study of another painter's work is not art anyway. You know, "Oh yeah, but you're not using your original voice." Like, who cares? You know, this is about learning. It's about what you learn. And I have to say, I find generally the artists that are like that, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, say it quietly, they're not very good. Okay. I really hope you enjoyed this session today. It was fun for me. Listen, I'm going to try and get back to regular Friday lives again because I miss them so much and they're a lot of fun. But they might sometimes be like, you know, just something really short, just an idea. Right, Thomas. Thomas says, "Great to have you in our life on this Friday with the world being such a mess." It is a mess, isn't it? It really is a mess. But there are signs of hope. There are a few signs of hope, you know. Looks very much to me like the MAGA coalition is destroying itself, which I kind of thought it might, or hoped it might. although things apparently are getting worse in the UK, so we're going to have to see what happens. But have a go, you know, do this, have a go, a bash at doing this kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Highly, highly simplified, you know, that is the point. And that is also what you need to do. Like if you were out there painting from nature, this would be a really, really good place to start. So this that I did today is like a little bit on from this, but not very far. It's still like at the very, very, oh, that's a bit obvious there. I don't like that bit. Still wet. Like the next stage from this, if I wanted to take it further, I just wanted to do this as a colour study. If I wanted to take it further, I would be working into some of these edges more and adding a little bit of texture around here, you know, that kind of thing. This is also a really good thing to do. Just do them in raw umber and white. Just do value studies like this. This is actually part of the workshop that I'm teaching at the moment. As you can see, I'm painting lots of trees at the moment. This tree is actually from the orchard out the back, although it doesn't look like that now because all of the trees have lost their leaves. Anyway, I'm going to go and get my dinner. It's Friday. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session. And I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.